Hello everyone and welcome back to Towergate. It is Towergate day number 397. Thursday, April the 12th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Love the comments from the last video. Really good comments. I really appreciate it. I have got to have the smartest subs to my channel. It's great. I go to other people's channels and look at their channels and look at the comment section. And I look at my comment section. No comparison. I have the best comment section and the best subs on YouTube. We may not be the biggest, but we're definitely the best. Amen. Let's get started. Lots to cover. Governor Moonbeam of California has agreed to sending the National Guard to the border. Why did he agree to it? Well, it's very simple. Because he knows he would lose his court challenge in 5 minutes flat. That's all it would take for the judge to go, let's see, you're challenging the president sending the National Guard to your border? Oh, okay, well, he has that legal authority under the Constitution. Bam! You lose. Next question. Next case. And Moonbeam would walk out with his tail between his legs, looking like a fool. And he knows that. That's why he's no longer going to put up a fight. The troops are going, the National Guard's heading to the border of California, Governor Moonbeam. Well, the rumors that we've been hearing for months and months turn out are true. Paul Ryan, big ears, Paul Ryan, Eddie Munster, is leaving. He is leaving. Unfortunately, not as quick as we would like, but he will be leaving as soon as the Congress fires up its new session after the midterm elections in January. He will be leaving the Congress. Now, I think there's various reasons for this. The primary reason he's giving, well, the only reason he's really giving, is the fact that he wants to spend more time with his family. And in his case, there's a lot of truth to this, actually. Something he's been talking about for quite a few months. It is true that he has a couple of teenage kids. One just turned 13, I think. And I think he really does want to be back home where his kids are. He hardly ever sees them. He only comes home on the weekends. He's in Washington every week. Sometimes he doesn't even come home on the weekends. He just doesn't get to see his kids hardly at all. And so I think that is a legitimate concern of his, and it's something he's talked about for some time. But it's just one of the many reasons that Nunes, that Eddie Munster wants to get out. It's for the same reason those other 26 Republicans want to get out who were anti-Trumpers. They realize it's no fun being in Washington when your side's losing and going to lose bad. He also realizes he very well could get upset and beat in his re-election bid. Very well could. And he'll probably, I'm sure, back somebody from the deep state. But he certainly will be leaving as speaker. And I think it also has something to do with the fact that he knows that there's heavy turbulence coming up. And he just wants to get out of there before it all hits the fan. Also, you have to remember, a lot of these things that Nunes and Grassley and Goodlatte are trying to do, a lot of these things require his approval. He is the speaker. So he's probably tired of getting pressured and phone calls every day and meetings every day with Nunes and all these guys pushing him to push the DOJ and the FBI. He's caught up into a lot of things that are probably not any fun, and they're political losers. And he doesn't need the money. He's got a lot of money. His wife's family is loaded. They got tons of money. So money is not an issue. And he can always go be a lobbyist to make 10 times, 100 times what he makes as a congressman. So it's not a money issue. I think some of it is a family issue. But I think it has probably a lot more to do. Probably about half family and half of it that is just no fun. That job is no fun anymore, especially if you're on the other team. Because they're now starting to lose. And he knows what's coming. He knows the storm that is coming, and he does not want to be caught up in any of it. Because he will be presiding over various things. He will have to take hard positions on things. He's got a lot of conflicts of interest. There's a lot of problems ahead for Big Ears Paul Ryan Eddie Munster if he sticks around for the aftermath of what is coming. And he knows it. He's getting out like the other 26 Republicans. It's just no fun being in Trump land now that he's taken over the swamp and trying to clean it out. Tough deal. But you can see that the fact that all these guys, anti-Trumpers, never-Trumpers, they're all leaving. Partly because they know that they might get upset in an embarrassing way in their attempt to get reelected. And some of it is just that literally is not fun. Imagine being on a team where every day you go out and get your butt kicked. Eventually you get tired of it. And especially if you know there's no chance of you winning in the future. If the future looks very dark, you just want to get out. See ya, big ears. Eddie Munster Ryan. Glad to see you go. The question is, will we get McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, or will we get Scalise? We would much rather see Scalise. He's a very good man. McCarthy, he's establishment. He's been a kind of a protege to Paul Ryan. He's probably the one the establishment will try to vote for. They'll try to move him in there. But Scalise, I hope Scalise fights that. I hope Scalise doesn't just say, well, if McCarthy wants it, I'm not going to challenge him. I hope he doesn't do that. I hope he challenges McCarthy. I really do. I don't know if he'll beat him, but I hope he challenges McCarthy for the speaker position. Would love to see Steve Scalise as speaker. Way, way better than McCarthy, and certainly way better than Big Ears Paul Ryan, who's been a disgrace. Good to see him go. Well, that's a big victory, everyone. It's a big victory. You can smile. It's okay. Well, it looks like Devin Nunes' threat to impeach Rodenstein and Wray has finally paid off, just like he said it would. Nunes has now had a chance to go over and look at that electronic communication. It has been slightly redacted. They have removed the name or blacked out the name of a foreign agent and the name of a foreign government. Essentially, wherever they put a black mark through it, they put a black mark and then they paste it over at foreign agent or foreign government. Several places in the document. Nunes has no problem with that whatsoever. And the reason is because he already knows who the foreign agent and the foreign government is that's being blacked out in this document. We know who it is. The foreign government is Australia, and the foreign agent is Alexander Down the Hatch Downer. Now, for those of you who are still not completely sure what we're talking about here, we're talking about the EC, the two-page electronic communication, which is the document that would give the reason for launching the Trump-Russia investigation. And the reason that Nunes was tipped off to this, and the reason he started requesting this document about 4 or 5 months ago, was because of that New York Times story that we covered here on Towergate. The New York Times story that came out and said, well, if you remember what was going on, the dossier about 4 or 5 months ago was the height of questioning the credibility of the dossier. And it had pretty much been beaten to death, so that it had been pretty much proven that the dossier was a bunch of garbage. Okay? So, in an effort to save the deep state, the New York Times claims that they had sources at the DOJ and FBI that told them, oh, well, it wasn't the dossier. That had nothing to do with starting the investigation. It was this meeting that Papadopoulos had with Downer. So Nunes takes a look at that and goes, wow, we can't even see that EC. They've been fighting us on that forever, but they leak it to the New York Times. They didn't actually leak the EC. They leaked the information. FBI and DOJ sources they cited that said that the EC, the electronic communication, was stating that it was not the dossier, but the Papadopoulos and Alexander Down the Hatch Downer meeting is what launched the investigation. At which point me and many other people gave a list of reasons why that had to be crazy and not true. Number one reason is, if that was the case, then why did that first FISA warrant get shot down? Because that the reason that they would have used to get the FISA warrant would have been the Papadopoulos meeting with Downer. And if that was the reason they launched the investigation, then why was it shot down by the FISA court? That was the first FISA court request. Shot down. That would have had to been the Papadopoulos and Downer. Okay, so that's one thing that puts some question as to whether or not this is true. The second thing is, if that was true, if it was Papadopoulos in the Downer meeting, then why did they wait 8 months afterwards, after it had been, they had learned that this all happened, and 10 months after the meeting took place in London? Why did they wait so long to even interview Papadopoulos? And there's other things. We went down a list. But the bottom line is, Nunes wants to establish clearly what was the reason for the Trump-Russia investigation. And either way you go, whether it was, in fact, Papadopoulos and the meeting with Papadopoulos and Downer, with Downer in London, if that was the reason actually cited in the EC, in the electronic communication, then why was none of the other FISA requests, none of the FISA requests, none of the warrants, none of this other stuff ever mentioned Papadopoulos and Downer or any of that? It was all based on Carter Page and all these other things. I mean, it's like you had a bunch of schizophrenics running the DOJ and the FBI. Like you had two totally different groups of people. One group of people working the dossier and one group of people working Papadopoulos. But Papadopoulos never comes into play until much later. None of it makes any sense. So Nunes wanted to establish, number one, first of all, was the New York Times, was that leak to the New York Times about what was in the EC correct? Would the EC show that it was Papadopoulos, the meeting of Papadopoulos and Downer, that actually led to the, is that what's in the EC that actually led to the investigation? He wanted to establish that and see if that was true. And there's probably some other things, but if that is true, then that raises even more questions about why they didn't go down that track. It's not the track they went down. They tell us that's a reason in the EC for the Trump-Russia investigation, but at that point, there doesn't seem to be any interest in that. They start the investigation based on that, but then they immediately shift to the dossier, and everything is based on the dossier from that point on. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work. I mean, there's a huge disconnect in this whole story. And that's what Nunes is probably trying to get to the bottom of. But he has now seen it, because we understand that he contacted Rosenstein last night and Chris Wray late last night, around, I understand, somewhere around 10:30, 11 o'clock p.m. Contacted them and said, hey, tomorrow, just want you to know what's going on. If tomorrow morning when we get there, we can't come over and take a look at that EC in a skiff or something, if that does not happen, you can expect by noon that we're going to have voted to impeach you. We are going to impeach you and remove you from office. So Rosenstein and Wray had no choice. Now the only other question is, did they actually show them the actual EC, or are they trying to show him a fake document? God help them if they try to pull that. I don't even think they would try that. That is just too risky. Too risky. Don't think they'll go there, but yes, it has worked. Nunes was right. When he told Fox News, he said, oh, I'm going to get to look at it. Believe me, because I'm going to threaten them with impeachment, removal from office. And they'll show it to me. And he was right. You just got to play hardball. What did we talk about yesterday? Offense. Offense. It works. You see? You just try it once and it works. And once you've proven that it works, you show it to other people and they know it works too. And that's what everybody should be doing. Threaten impeachment. Don't just threaten, do it. And that's what he did. He said on the phone last night, hey, you guys, I'm telling you right now, I'm not joking. Tomorrow morning, if we don't see that EC, we're going to impeach you, period. That's exactly what needs to be done. Maybe he watched my video. Prime Minister of UK says that she wants proof that Assad's responsible for the attack and that she needs more evidence to be able to conclusively say that it was Assad that did it. Well, like I said, Assad, I would say the chances of Assad being behind that chemical attack is less than 1%. And why is Theresa May behaving this way? I mean, she's getting off the bandwagon, is she not? Isn't she supposed to be on board for the whole thing? Hasn't she been talking a completely different story? But now all of a sudden, when her feet are put to the fire, she wants more time and more evidence. Why is that? Politics. Politics. She's trying to get reelected. She's trying to get reelected, so she's sending a message. Hey, you guys, you have to give me some political cover. Send me something. Send me some evidence. Anything. Some photos, some medical records, some medical evidence, some witnesses, something. Anything. Because right now, I am political toast if I go out and approve of this before we see the evidence. And unfortunately, Trump has already tweeted that the Russians or that the missiles are going to be headed that way, which I don't think was a good idea. But that's what he said, and that could have other implications we'll talk about in just a moment. Well, Rand Paul is outraged that he has just learned from the FBI that Peter's been Strokinus and Lisa Page still have their secret clearances. Well, I think to work in the FBI, I think you have to have at least some kind of secret clearance, my guess. To even walk in the building, you probably have to have a secret clearance. So that doesn't surprise me. But what it tells us is that they most certainly have been turned and are working for Horowitz, working for Huber, working for the prosecution, essentially. They've turned. That's what that tells you. Otherwise, they would be fired. They would be gone, or would have resigned, been forced out, just like everyone else who's not cooperating. The people who are cooperating are still there. The people who are not cooperating, who are targets, the people in the small group, they're gone. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear who's cooperating and who is not. Strzok and Page are obviously cooperating. This is the only thing you can conclude from that. Well, there's some leaking going on. There is some leaking going on. We're getting this story now that says they asked the question, what was the FBI agents looking for in the Cohen raid? And there's some people leaking out of the FBI in New York, I guess, saying that apparently they were looking for records related to the Access Hollywood tape. What that has to do with all of Trump and Cohen's communications, with all their dealings in business and taxes and all these other things, I don't know. I think it's about a lot more than just the Access Hollywood tape, and I don't know what in the world that would have to do with anything, but I guess we'll find out as the leaks continue on. We have James Comey out there comparing Trump to a mob boss. That is really unbelievable. After Comey has represented one of the worst mob families, crime families in the world, that would be the Clinton crime family. He represented the HSBC folks, which is a private criminal banking family, international criminal banking family. He is just rotten to the core. And he, like Lynch and others, are out there trying to make their political case because they know that this case will be adjudicated in two places. One, in the courtroom, and also in the public courtroom, the court of public opinion. And the battle is to try to take it to the court of public opinion. And when the indictments come down, you can expect to see the protests, the riots, and everything else. And this is what Comey and Lynch are playing to, while facing off against one another, because they're all turning on each other, trying to protect their territory. So you can see that there's a lot of confusing activity going on. And they wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't be doing this unless they knew that there was going to be criminal liability for them. The smart thing that they would do, they wouldn't say anything about it. They would shut up about it, forget about it, not talk about it, talk about other things. But that's not what they're doing. They're out there reliving the experience and giving us their personal spin. It's because that they understand that the court of public opinion is going to be a major factor in what happens here, and they want to try to win their case in the court of public opinion. They can't control what happens in the courtroom too much. That'll be determined by the facts and the witnesses and the evidence. But they believe that they have to get out there in the court of public opinion and make their case, which means they know that there's going to be a case, or there'd be no need to go out and make the case in the court of public opinion. They believe they're going to be indicted. Rand Paul, again, saying that, yes, the Cohen raid was an abuse of power by Mueller. You're absolutely right. Dr. Paul, once again. Fox News is currently working on a story that we're going to learn a lot more about here in the next couple of days. And I believe Catherine Herridge is the one working on this. She's a very good reporter. And we're now learning that McCabe's GoFundMe donors, just as we suspected, are being learned. And it appears it is a who's who of Democratic operatives, mega donors, and FBI officials. So they're working on that story now, and that report will soon be coming out. So stay tuned. We're about to find out who a lot of these people are who donated over $500,000 to McCabe. And what is that called? Hush money. Keep your mouth shut, Andy, and we'll take care of you. Well, the Russians have responded. They say if we strike Syria, they will use their anti-missile systems, which are damn good, to knock our missiles out. They also said they'll target the source from where the missiles were launched. That's not good. You know, if we end up in World War III with the Russians, or at least another Cuban Missile Crisis type Mexican standoff with the Russians, it will be your fault, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, left-wingers. It'll be your fault. It's been nothing but Trump, Russia, Russia, Trump, Trump, Russia, Russia, Trump, Trump, Russia, Russia, Russia. All freaking year and a half now. You've ratcheted things up. Trump wanted to have good relations with the Russians. He wanted to try to get along, get them to help him beat back terrorism and all these things. But you put him into a box. And then you forced his hand now in this position to force him to do this strike. Probably some kind of a false flag. God knows what's behind it or who's behind it. But now look where we are. Trump's promised he's going to hit him with these missiles, even before we've learned who conclusively is responsible. They automatically assume it's Assad. Last time they said it was Assad, they ended up doing an investigation and then coming out later and saying, oh, well, it looks like it was one of the rebel groups. They don't know who did it. Could be Al-Qaeda, ISIS. They're all in Syria. Not a lot of them. Most of them have been driven out, but there's still some sources there. Or it could just be a good old-fashioned false flag. Could be Israelis, could be the U.S., could be the Brits, could be a combination. Who knows? The last guy on the planet, though, who probably wanted that to happen was Assad. So what happens? Does Trump, he's already said he's going to launch some missiles or something. If he does, will the Russians actually respond by knocking those missiles out? And how will we respond to that? And will the Russians actually hit the ship that launched the missiles? That's getting into some very dangerous territory. The Russians have moved all the ships that they had at that particular harbor there, where they had their ships. They've moved them all back to pretty close within Russian borders. They're moving all their assets back to within Russian borders, which means that if we retaliate against them, we have to do it on Russian soil. Putin is not, as I said in the previous video, it's down to this Nord Stream, South Stream pipeline. The Russians cannot allow us to gain control of Syria and put in that South Stream pipeline. That would cost the Russians 25, 35, 40%, God knows, of their share, market share in Europe of gas and oil exports. That would destroy them. They're almost completely reliant and dependent on those exports. If you want to destroy Russia, that's what you do. Putin knows this. He cannot and will not let that happen. It's life or death for him. It's not just, for us, it's just, to launch a few missiles, hit some targets, the Syrian army or whatever. For Putin, the stakes are much, much, much higher. And I don't think Trump may even know about the Nord Stream, South Stream pipeline. He may not follow that closely. He may not know what the hell's really going on and what's actually driving every bit of this. But one thing's for sure, if we end up in another Cuban Missile Crisis type scenario with the Russians, we know who will be to blame. Last night, I told you that Jay Sekulow, one of the president's attorneys, as well as the president of the American Center for Law and Justice, had been working very hard over the past 6 or 8 months to get some FOIA request documents. He has now received some of those documents, and he says there's some real bombshells. So let's see what Jay Sekulow has to say about some of these documents he's received, despite the fact that they came highly redacted, entire pages completely redacted, including an entire email that was written by Samantha Power's counselor, he's described as counselor, to 60 Minutes. The entire email was blacked out. But let's go through what we do know, and of course Sekulow will be going back to court to try to get the unredacted versions, and of course Trump could declassify the whole thing, and Sekulow's one of his lawyers. Maybe Sekulow should just ask President Trump, hey, why don't you declassify all this? But anyway, let's move forward with this. Jay Sekulow has finally received the documents from the FOIA request from many months ago. He says there are bombshells and a lot of trouble for Samantha Power and Obama cabinet members. Powers unmasked 260 times, including on January 20th, Inauguration Day. As Trump was being sworn in, they were doing unmasking. Documents show clear collusion between the media and the Obama administration to sabotage Trump and his agenda. Despite the heavy redactions, Sekulow was able to determine that this document shows that Powers was openly insulting President Trump, but it gets much worse. The email chains between Powers and her counselor, Nicholas Steinberg, just 3 days after the election. 3 days after the election. We're talking back in November. After the election, in which Power is actively discussing an idea to seek maximum amplification of her politically biased messaging. She talked about reaching out to 60 Minutes, Charlie Rose, or Bill Owens. This email included a draft pitch email that was heavily redacted. This was also sent to CBS Sunday Morning, which is the Sunday morning news show. And I think is that Stephanopoulos that's on there, or is that ABC? I can't remember which one he's on. But anyway, so what this is saying is that she actually put together an email, which was a sales pitch to 60 Minutes and CBS News, I guess to have her or a surrogate go on their show and peddle Trump Russia. There was an email to Bill Owens of 60 Minutes where Powers writes, quote, "We're still reeling here, as you might imagine." Remember, 3 days after the election. "We're still reeling here, as you might imagine. Notwithstanding this, Tuesday's results have given us an even greater sense of urgency to get our work done. In our last few months, 70 good long days left." Now, in the transition period, which is the period we're talking about, they do nothing more. Once the president's been elected, won the election, the transition begins, and the transition is just that. It's a transition, you out and him in. There shouldn't be any more work really being done. Everything kind of goes in hold status. As you begin sharing the new administration, or the old administration going out, begins to share with the new administration as they have this transition. But they don't implement any new policies or do anything else. If there's a war, they continue or whatever. But as far as things like this, you don't continue with policy initiatives and things and such like that. Everything goes into a holding pattern. That makes this comment from Powers very, very interesting. Also, in an email chain with Tom Friedman, and we all know about Tom Friedman, do we not? Steinberg, her counselor, Powers' counselor, forwards an article by Larry Diamond entitled "Russia and the Threat to Liberal Democracy." Steinberg suggested it would be good source material for your book, meaning Samantha Powers. Must mean that he was helping her write a book. So Samantha Powers must have a book coming out. This all happened at a time when Powers was conducting massive unmasking requests. Also, Jorge Ramos was involved in email exchanges with Powers and Steinberg. The docs show almost constant unmasking from Rice, Rhodes, and Power in the final days of the Obama administration. What this shows you, again, more evidence that the entire Obama administration, the cabinet, was extremely involved in the coup. And now, as we can see, it's looking a lot more like this insurance policy was, in fact, an effort during the transition policy to the time during the transition period. It looks like that 70-day transition period was a time when they were trying to get as much information as they possibly could, as much media exposure as they possibly could, to try to come up with something or anything which they could use to give Comey and Lynch and Obama the ability to step up to the podium and tell America that they had to postpone the inauguration because of information that had come to light through the intelligence agency to the FBI about troubling things that occurred between Trump and Russia and the election. They were going to try and keep Trump from being inaugurated. They were going to try to drop this Trump-Russia heavy bomb, and that's why they were doing constant unmasking for the last few days, because they were trying to dig for anything they possibly could. They were desperate. That's how desperate and crazy they were, and it looks more and more like that's what the insurance policy was an effort to find the evidence that they needed to be able to postpone the inauguration, to have an investigation based on the evidence they found that Trump was colluding with the Russians to fix the election. But they were never, obviously, able to get the evidence. They could never get Comey and Lynch and Obama to look at it and go, boy, if we do this, man, this country is going to come unglued. It's got to be slam dunk. We have got to have hard evidence. We got to make this case. We got to go out and make this case. If we're going to do this, it better be slam dunk, and they could never get to slam dunk. So it wasn't able to happen. That's what that insurance policy was. It was to take down Trump, to cancel the inauguration, to come out and cite evidence that he was colluding with the Russians to fix the election against Hillary, and they were going to try to postpone the inauguration until there was an investigation. But it was just way, way too risky a move. They decided they couldn't go through with it, so they decided, okay, let him get inaugurated, let him get sworn in. We'll continue. We got all of our people at CIA. We got our people buried at the DOJ. They're buried in at the FBI. They're hunkered down. We're running things. Obama's got his place 2 blocks from the White House with Valerie Jarrett and 60 or 70 lawyers running operations. And that is apparently what we are learning. Now, Sekulow is going to go get the unredacted version. I hope he'll get that. And we will learn a lot more about details, which I think are going to show that that was what that insurance policy really was. It was an effort to stop Trump from being sworn in. They were going to try to stop the inauguration process. They just did everything they could, but they just couldn't get what they needed to do it. Absolutely unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. So, we've been talking a lot in the past couple days. The spotlight is really on Rod Rodenstein right now. So I have an exit question for all of you, because I love reading your comments. So here's the question for you to ponder. And I'll look forward to reading all your comments on this question. Here is the question. Should Rodenstein be fired? How should he be fired, if you think he should be? And by who? I will look forward to reading your comments, and I'll be back tomorrow for more Towergate. You guys have a good night. Goodbye.